If you're a creator or a maintainer of open source, then you need to be thinking a viable business. Some folks will start in on an open source project and say, well, we'll figure out how to make money later. Push towards enterprises being more comfortable with being users of open source.
So what is the advice that you have for companies following the footsteps in terms of taking open core and building a business model around that?
As best you can, have a plan from the beginning. You have to be mindful of where you want to go. If you want to be open core, do it unapologetically and make sure that your open source project is providing value, not just the open core piece of it.
While you are an open source platform company, how do you ensure you are meeting the stringent requirements of businesses and regulatory bodies?
We understand the core nature of database. Our software principle is secure by design.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of The Encounter, the show where we bring you face-to-face with today's pioneers, innovators, and trailblazers. Today we have Schlemmer, CEO of Percona, the leading open source database company. Anne, it's wonderful to have you on my show. Welcome to Johnny.tv.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I appreciate you.
So, Anne, I've been using Percona for almost a decade. I first came across Percona when I was looking at using MySQL in a HA mode. And since then, I've been tracking the progress, and it's been a phenomenal transformation from just offering support for MySQL to where you are today. Mm-hmm. So let me kick off this discussion by asking you, how do you see the role of open source evolving in the enterprise DB market, especially with the advancements in technology and especially with cloud adoption on a raise?
Sure. Well, first, thank you for using Percona, being one of our users. It's always great to hear that and meet with folks. Where do I see open source going with the enterprise? Obviously, we've seen a lot of folks moving that way, right? And using it. But I like to think about it in two different ways. You want to think about folks that are using open source, and then also folks that are the creators and the maintainers of open source. So in the enterprise, we're seeing both. We're actually seeing a push towards enterprises being more comfortable with being users of open source. And they're wanting to do that for the reasons that we're in open source as well, is they want to have innovations. They want to be solving problems, and to be able to have various use cases to do that. Using open source, that allows innovation to be quicker. It allows you to, if you want to use the word crowdsource, being able to have that. It also helps with cost saving. So we're seeing that as a very intentional strategy that enterprises are using with adopting open source, which is great because it helps them get their product to market more quickly. However, if you're a creator or a maintainer of open source, then you need to be thinking a viable business. How do you make that a viable business? And that's where there's a lot of discussions going on right now in the open source community. And you mentioned, okay, look at the cloud and the cloud providers. We know that the hyperscalers, a lot of them, they're building on top of open source, yet they aren't themselves open source. That's not open. So this question of how do we maintain viable communities? How do we maintain these upstreams in a way that is beneficial to all? And there's a lot of debate, push-pull, if you will, in the community about who's using, who's maintaining, who's making money off of open source versus who's not, and how do you do that? So it's interesting times, and it's also about mitigating risk. I think that's an important consideration for enterprises right now, as you asked. Like, what's a consideration if you become reliant on an open source? Are you clear that project's going to maintain? Are they going to change licenses like we've seen recently? What's going to happen? So those are super important things we need to be mindful of and considering in the market.
Awesome. So I have the most obvious question, and So open source database is an open source database wherever you use it, from upstream to various distributions, even cloud-based managed databases. Why customers should leverage Percona? What differentiates Percona from other flavors of similar open source databases?
Our history within Percona, and like you mentioned, you've been using us for 10 years. We've been around for over 17 years, and we are strongly committed to our database distributions being open. And we have added enterprise features that are open that people can use without having that lock-in. We believe they run better with us and coming to us with our expertise. We definitely have embraced, I almost want to call it an old school model of open source, of using services where we monetize our expertise through our services as opposed to our software. So why do people come to us? Well, we're open, we're collaborative, we're trying to solve problems with our customers and users together, because one of our missions is we believe an open world is a better world. We believe we can all innovate together for the benefit of all. So coming to us, particularly thinking about most people, they're not database experts. And there's a lot of advantages to the cloud and people going to the cloud, but that's a shared responsibility model. It's only going to get you so far. They're not, the hyperscalers don't really care about the performance. I mean, they want you to be successful for sure, but they're not going to help you with that. That's not where their expertise is. So coming to Percona is saying, hey, we've got that deep expertise. We want you to be successful with what your business is, and we'll help you. We'll help you that way. We really believe in helping folks avoid vendor lock-in and managing costs. That's how we operate as a company as well. So yeah, that's where we come from.
Great. So Percona takes a lot of these open source distributions and enhances them for high availability, manageability, and so on.
Correct.
If you have to call out something significant, particularly from the MySQL community, what is the value addition that Percona has done to MySQL community?
Well, as I mentioned before, what we have taken is we always are a direct drop-in replacement for the community version. And we have added enterprise features that you can't get from MySQL community. You get it from Oracle, from the enterprise, but we've built our distribution gives you a number of those without having that cost. And we also have tooling around it to make sure that you're performant in the reliability and the scalability of the database as well. Those are out there. And it's all backed by our experts. So I'm proud. We're the best of the best. We have those experts, whether it's in support, managed services, professional services, and we also have a very robust, strong community and community forums as well. And we are open source. We believe in it. So we are actively involved with upstream. We're actively involved with the folks at Oracle as well. And again, trying to solve problems, but we believe that our distribution is the best one out there because it is so performant and gives those additional features.
Perfect. Yeah, so I've been using your Kubernetes operators to deploy MySQL in Kubernetes, and I really like the work and the contribution from your team. So thanks for keeping it that way, adding a lot of value to the ecosystem and community.
Yeah, that's a big area of focus these days is our operators for sure. So I'm glad that you're using them, and I hope you're giving back information too, and to make sure that you're having a good user experience. I always appreciate, and the team appreciates that feedback to continue to add value.
Absolutely. So, and one more very important question. So, particularly with generative AI and data becoming super valuable for training these data sets, these models and creating data sets, security, privacy, compliance is becoming more and more important. And in certain geographies like EU, it is of utmost important for customers.
Absolutely.
So while you are an open source solutions company, a platform company, how do you ensure you are meeting the stringent requirements of businesses and regulatory bodies?
A number of ways. First, you have to be mindful and aware of them. So we have a team that we keep up with the legislations as they're coming out. And we're a global company. It's a global, right? Global economy. And I would say the EU continues to drive the privacy issues, right? Many people follow their example. So we want to make sure that we keep relevant and understand what's happening. Next to that, as software principles, our software principle is secure by design. So I think that, an old school thought is like, oh, open source is just, kind of free, willy-nilly. Maybe it's just a hobby. We're in the database space. That's not how we think at all, right? The data has to be secure. So secure by design. And another one of our values is always do no harm. Any software that we put out should not be doing any harm to our customers that are using it. We understand the core nature of database, right? And what that is. And all software needs to be secure by design. But I want to say we don't want to make a headline because 9 times out of 10 those headlines are not positive on if they're breached. So we have to get at it from many different angles. Having that security and compliance team that's keeping up and making sure that we're compliant. And then also just ingrained in our engineering and our product design, it's got to be secure by design. Along with performant, available, high available, all of those things there, but it has to be there as well. Yeah.
Completely agree. So the next question that I want to ask you is, we are seeing polymorphic databases. Now, let me expand on that. If you look at Azure Cosmos DB, if you look at Amazon's Aurora or Cloud Spanner, and most recently Alloy DB from Google, what is unique about all these offerings is the engine is the same, but they expose different protocols to make the developers talk to these databases. For example, the same database engine acting as MongoDB for a developer, MySQL as a different developer, and even PGSQL, right? Mm-hmm. So there is a rise of this so-called managed polymorphic databases in the cloud. How do you see this trend, and how does that impact the roadmap of Percona?
I see this trend continuing and possibly expanding. You mentioned, right, the large language models, AI, the explosion of data and the availability of data and new ways to use it. And there are well-established databases. While a lot of folks are finding new databases for different use cases, I know you just had a recent talk on vector and vector databases and what is that meaning. People aren't just going to rip and replace their set databases. So how do you continue to talk to one another and problem set? So how does that influence our roadmap is really speaking to customers, looking at the market and understanding what are their workloads, what are the use cases, and understanding, it's one of the reasons why years ago we went into a multi-database model. We started as a MySQL company. We have Mongo, we have Postgres. As you just mentioned, we work in Kubernetes with our operators because it continues to evolve. And thinking ahead and how to make that user experiences, developers probably don't care. They just want it to work. They want to make sure that's use case and what is that application layer there to speak to it. So having that mindset and that idea of extensibility in architecting the databases and being, I dare say, just open-minded to what are those possibilities and not having religion of like, oh, but this way is the best way, or hanging on to old school MySQL or Postgres. Like you have to think beyond that because technology is always evolving. So yeah, it's definitely impacting, and we're seeing innovators. We see innovators that you just mentioned as well. How are they doing that and being able to think outside the box? My bias towards open source is I would like to see more of these things done out in the open and solving the problems together. And then there is that opportunity for the uniqueness of that unique value add. And I believe in making money as well. I like to eat. I like the roof over my head. So how do we do all that? How do we do all that together? Is really important. it's an exciting time, and sometimes it's overwhelming. I don't know about you, but it's a little overwhelming. There's a lot.
I
There's
know.
lots of possibilities. There's a lot of possibilities. Yeah,
But
which is great.
and you gave a perfect CEO answer. So
Yeah,
you have been politically correct and made sure you addressed it that way.
yeah,
Perfect. I agree with you, and uh, your answer, though it didn't directly respond to my question, I actually agree with what you said. This got to be open source. Customers prefer more transparency,
yeah.
and we hope one of these opaque black box databases come out into wild as open source, and maybe Percona will start to embrace it. So
Yeah. I think the pressure's there. The pressure is definitely there. Because frankly, a lot of the folks that you just mentioned, they are building on top of upstream. So they have vulnerability as well. And I don't think they want to take that on. So we are seeing honest contributions in the open source space from folks that used to be only known as closed. I believe there's more that can be done, and they can go much further than they've been. We unapologetically have said that we've built upon the shoulders of giants, right? We build on upstream, but we also give back. We give back an awful lot. So yes, and I will continue to be diplomatic.
I completely
Sorry.
understand.
Yeah, that's how it goes. But yeah.
So, and interestingly, you mentioned about vector databases and the explosion of Gen AI and overwhelming
Hmm.
pace at which this is growing.
Yeah.
So, there are a new family of open source vector databases that are becoming very popular. So, can we expect Percona to offer one of these vector databases as a managed database and bring some of the goodness that you have added to Postgres and MySQL to some of the open source vector databases? Is that a part of your roadmap?
Right now, that's not a part of our roadmap to jump into that. Historically, what we've done is we have built upon databases that are wide in distribution already, because we're not creators of markets. Historically, we have not been a creator of market. So is it a no? It's not a not never, right? Yes, but it's a matter of when. Right now, we are looking at the vector support within for Postgres, PG Vector.
Okay.
We're looking at that. In the MySQL space, there's a lot of folks that have built upon MySQL, like Vitess and PlanetScale. We are talking to them to understand, because there could be a natural synergy there, and that we could build
Yeah.
upon that. So we definitely are exploring it. We have to. We're exploring that and looking at that. But I can't say to you right now, Jenny, that, okay, second half of 2024, you're going to see it. We're working on it, but and again, I will be repetitive on what is the customers in the market looking for, and where is that gap, that problems that need to be solved. And vector support is definitely one of them that's out there.
Well, as someone who tracks Percona and as a fan of Percona, I anticipate, I look forward to seeing a vector database in your portfolio. But I completely understand. We got to wait and watch. There is so much of noise, so much of confusion in the landscape. I think it's better to wait and watch before you make a move. So, and we're almost nearing the end of this discussion, and I want to ask you something not specific to Percona. So you have been an extremely successful leader, and you have grown Percona to a significant size. Today, it's one of the market leaders when it comes to open source databases, and you actually demonstrated how to monetize and build a successful commercial entity from open core. So what is the advice that you have for companies who are following the footsteps in terms of taking open core and building a business model around that?
My advice would be, as best you can, have a plan from the beginning, right? Some folks will start in on their open source project and say, well, we'll figure out how to make money later, which I get the excitement of that, but it's really key to think about it from the beginning. And as you're building your brand and what is your brand promise and reputation that you want to have, you have to be mindful of where you want to go. So if you want to be open core, do it unapologetically. Be very upfront about it and state what it is, and make sure that your open source project is providing value, not just the open core piece of it. So that would be my GitLab is a great example of that. They are very clear. They're unapologetic. This is our model. This is what we're doing. And they're amazingly open with things that they do. So that's my recommendation is have that clarity. Understand there's going to be bumps if you end up taking outside funding. There's going to be that pressure for revenue growth and profitability. Profitability's come into the equation, which it wasn't as much in the conversation previously. So yeah, I think really it's hard to anticipate the future and what your business is going to look like, but I would just encourage thinking about that from the beginning.
Absolutely. I love that phrase of being unapologetic about being open core and driving the community contribution as well as driving a business model around that. Perfect. That's a great note to end this discussion. And thank you so much for joining my show. It's been a very valuable conversation. I hope my audiences and my community loves this. So thanks. And I look forward to talking to you again when you add additional databases to your portfolio.
Yes. And thanks for having me. And again, thanks for being a user of Percona. We appreciate you.
Great. Thank you.